There are things a father carries that nobody ever sees. Not the weight of tools on a job site, not the ache in a knee that's been climbed on, kneeled on, and worn down over 4 decades. Not even the loneliness of driving home at midnight, knowing your son's birthday game already ended 3 hours ago. I mean the other weight, the invisible kind. The kind where you pay for something quietly, a hospital bill, a roof, a month of daycare, and you say nothing because the help was never about getting credit. It was about love. Simple, uncomplicated, no strings attached love. For 4 years, I carried that weight without complaint. And then, on a sunny Saturday afternoon at a backyard barbecue, my son looked me in the eye in front of everyone, his wife, his mother, his stepfather, and said loud enough for the whole patio to hear, "Dad, you'll never be half the man Richard is." The grill hissed. Nobody laughed. Nobody defended me. I stood there, holding a paper plate with a hamburger I hadn't touched, and I smiled. Not because it didn't hurt, because I had just made a decision. Stay with me. Because what happened over the next 10 days didn't just change my son's life. It changed everything he thought he understood about who had been standing behind him all along. My name is Jack Sullivan. I am 61 years old. I grew up in Columbus, Ohio, in a house where the heat sometimes didn't work in February, and dinner was whatever my mother could stretch from what she had. My father worked 2 jobs. He wasn't home much, but when he was present, fully present. Eyes on you, hands ready, no distractions. That was the only model of fatherhood I ever knew, so that was the model I followed. At 22, I started as an HVAC apprentice. Entry level, crawl spaces, attic units, summer heat, winter cold. By 30, I had my own license. By 40, I had a small company. Nothing glamorous, 6 technicians, a reliable reputation, contracts with 3 school districts, and a handful of commercial properties. I built it with my hands and my knees, and about 1,000 early mornings and late nights. I also built a marriage, for a while. Melissa was sharp and kind, and she made the house feel like a home. We had Ethan when I was 27. Watching that boy come into the world was the single best moment of my life, without competition. The marriage didn't survive the years. Too many missed dinners, too many games I watched highlights of instead of attending. Too many times she needed a partner and got a provider instead. I don't blame Melissa. I understand now what I didn't understand then. The divorce was quiet and civil. Ethan was 25 when the papers were finalized. Old enough to understand that sometimes 2 decent people can't make it work. Old enough to pick a side. Anyway, he didn't pick mine. That's when Richard entered the picture. Richard Carmichael was everything I appeared not to be. He was polished, confident. He wore clothes that fit properly and drove a car that made a statement. He sold commercial real estate, and he was good at it. Good enough to have opinions about everything and the kind of easy smile that made people believe he'd thought of things first. Melissa met him about 8 months after the divorce. Within a year, he was attending family events. Within 2 years, he was Ethan's first call when something went wrong. I noticed. I didn't say anything. Ethan was an adult. He could have whatever relationships he wanted. And honestly, if Richard was making my son's life easier, part of me was glad. What I didn't know, not yet, was that Richard wasn't making anything easier. He was just standing in the light that I was generating from somewhere nobody could see. Let me tell you about something I set up 4 years ago. After Ethan and Claire got married, after Lily was born, after I started watching my son struggle under bills that kept arriving faster than his salary could absorb them, I called my attorney, Linda Parker. Linda had handled my divorce. She was precise, direct, and completely without sentimentality, which is exactly what I needed. I told her I wanted to set up a trust, a discreet one, structured so that supplemental payments could go toward Ethan's mortgage, daycare, medical bills, property taxes, emergency repairs, without the money ever having my name visibly attached to it on the surface. She asked me why I didn't just write checks. I told her, because I didn't want my son to feel indebted. I wanted him to feel supported. There is a difference. A check from a parent carries weight. A silent safety net just holds. She understood. The Sullivan Family Trust was created on a Tuesday in March, 4 years before that barbecue. Every month since then, payments went out quietly. Mortgage supplement, daycare tuition, property taxes, emergency calls, the flooded bathroom, the roof after the storm, the hospital bills after Claire's complicated delivery. Ethan didn't know. Claire didn't know. Melissa didn't know. Richard, I later found out, knew just enough not to ask questions. And for 4 years, I watched my son live a life that he believed Richard had helped make stable. I watched him talk about Richard at family dinners with the kind of warmth and admiration that used to be in his voice when he talked about me. I told myself it was enough, that the help was the point, not the recognition. And then he stood at that barbecue and told me I'd never be half the man Richard was, and something very quiet inside me said, enough. I set my paper plate on the patio table. I said calmly, evenly, without any drama, if Richard's the better man, then let him pay from now on. Claire blinked. What do you mean? You'll find out, I said, and I walked to my truck. Nobody followed me. The rain started before I hit the interstate. Just a drizzle at first, the kind that makes the wipers squeak against a windshield that's not quite wet enough yet. My left knee ached the way it does before weather systems move in. Sports radio filled the cab, but I wasn't listening. I was somewhere else. I was back in February, almost 20 years earlier, standing in my kitchen at midnight, eating a stale gas station sandwich because I'd spent 14 hours on a school rooftop and every restaurant had already closed. Ethan had been asleep for hours. His Little League trophy was on the counter. Melissa told me he'd hit a triple. She'd saved me a slice of birthday cake. I stared at that cake for longer than I should have. Then I was somewhere else again. The porch. 8 years ago. Divorce papers still warm on the table. Ethan, coming to pick up boxes, barely saying anything, already deciding whose side he was on, even though no one had asked him to choose. I stopped him on his way out. I don't care what happens between your mother and me, I told him. I will always have your back. He nodded. Didn't say much. I thought that was a simple promise to keep. You make it. You hold it. Nobody warns you that someday keeping it might quietly cost you your dignity. I parked outside Linda Parker's office. The lights were still on. Linda looked up when I walked in. Her assistant had already gone home. The office was still and cool. Jack, you're still working? Apparently. She read my face immediately. What happened? I sat down and eased the pressure off my knee. My son finally told me the truth. She waited. She'd practiced law long enough to know that silence usually finishes the sentence better than words. Terminate every automatic payment, I said. Her expression didn't change. Her pen moved. Everything? Everything. Mortgage supplement, daycare, property taxes, medical reimbursements, home repairs. She stopped writing. Are you certain? I looked through her office window at the street below. People hurrying under umbrellas. A city bus hissing to a stop. Life moving exactly as it always does. Completely indifferent to yours. I've spent 4 years making sure Ethan never had to worry about unexpected bills, I said. She nodded. He doesn't know they come from me. Another nod. He thinks somebody else has been carrying him. She set her pen down and asked the question I had been asking myself since the porch. Is this about proving a point? I took a long breath. No, I said. I'm done protecting someone from consequences he insists don't exist. She slid one document across the desk. I signed it. My handwriting looked older than I remembered. The first missed payment would become noticeable in approximately 10 days. I walked out into the wet Columbus night and stood beside my truck for a long moment. For the first time in years, I wondered what my weekends might look like if I wasn't quietly solving someone else's emergencies. The first week was almost disappointingly quiet. I woke at 6 every morning, made coffee, sat on the porch. Mrs. Donnelly across the street walked her golden retriever at exactly 6:30, same as she had for years. Life looked identical from the outside. But somewhere inside a stack of electronic transactions, one automatic payment simply never arrived. The first crack appeared on a Tuesday. I was replacing a board on the porch railing when my phone buzzed. "Ethan." "Hey, Dad, you busy?" "Depends. Have you heard anything about daycare billing issues?" I kept driving the screw. "What kind of issues?" "They emailed Claire saying tuition hasn't been paid. I figured they made a mistake." "Call them," I said. "These things happen." We hung up in under a minute. He never asked me for money. He didn't know what to ask for, because he didn't know what had been quietly disappearing. 3 days later, the mortgage supplement failed to arrive. Claire found the notice in the mailbox. Ethan called the bank. Then he called Richard. "Buddy, we got some kind of mortgage notice. You know anything about that?" A short silence. Then Richard chuckled. "Probably a paperwork delay. Give me a couple days." Ethan relaxed. Claire didn't. 3 weeks after the barbecue, Columbus hit 94 degrees. My phone rang around noon. "Claire." "Jack, I'm sorry to bother you." "You never bother me." She sounded exhausted. Our air conditioner stopped working. Ethan said, "Maybe you could take a look at it." 40 years of instinct told me to grab my tool bag and drive over immediately. Every part of me that had spent a lifetime fixing things for people I loved was already halfway to the door. Instead, I walked to the kitchen and poured a cup of coffee. It tasted bitter. "I'm retired, Claire." "I know. I'm sorry." A quiet pause. "Okay," she said softly. She hung up without guilt-tripping me. Without manipulating me, she just accepted it. I stood, staring at my toolbox for a very long time. That weekend, I drove to Hoover Reservoir and fished with my old Army friend Tom for the first time in almost 2 years. Every previous weekend, there had been something urgent. A fence, a water heater, always something. Tom handed me a tackle box. "Took you long enough." "I've been busy." He looked at me. "You retired 3 years ago." "I know, Jack." He said it gently. "You haven't been busy. You've been available." That landed harder than he probably meant it to. Claire was the kind of woman who saved receipts, not obsessively. She wasn't organized the way anxious people are organized, but she knew her numbers. She kept grocery totals in a small notebook by the microwave. She could tell you what Lily's school shoes had cost without looking it up. After the kitchen table conversation with Ethan, when neither of them could explain who had actually paid for the roof, the hospital, the taxes, the plumbing, Claire went quiet, in a particular way that meant she was working something out. She called the daycare the next morning from the hallway outside her classroom. "Hi, this is Claire Sullivan, Lily's mom. I'm trying to understand the supplemental payment. Can you tell me whose account that came from?" She pulled a pen from the cup by the classroom phone. She wrote the answer on the back of a spelling worksheet. Sullivan Family Trust. That was the first time she saw the name. Not the first time it had paid for something, just the first time anyone had said it out loud. She called the mortgage company. Same label, same quiet monthly entry. She pulled old medical statements. Same. Property tax records. Same. 4 years of the same name, appearing and reappearing like a watermark on every document she had ever filed and never examined closely enough. Claire came home that evening, set the folder on the kitchen table, and looked at her husband. "Ethan," she said calmly, "who actually paid for all of this?" He opened his mouth, and for the first time in 4 years, he had no answer. Ethan called Richard that evening from the driveway. Claire stood in the laundry room, folding Lily's tiny shirts, while the dryer shook against the wall. Ethan had it on speaker. "Richard, did you ever actually pay any of these bills?" A pause. "I've helped this family in plenty of ways. That's not what I asked. I've got a meeting." The line went dead. Claire folded the same yellow shirt 3 times. Ethan sat in his car in the garage for a long time after that. He called Mark Allen, his accountant, recommended by Richard, naturally, and asked about the Sullivan family trust. Mark sighed. "That's your father's trust, Ethan." "My father's?" "Yes. How long has it been paying our bills?" A longer pause. "You really need to ask your father." "How long, Mark?" "Several years." Ethan gripped the steering wheel. People walked past the grocery store entrance outside. A teenager gathered stray carts. The world performed its ordinary routine, while his version of it quietly came apart. "Did Richard know?" Ethan asked. Mark hesitated 1 second too long. That was the only answer Ethan needed. He ended the call, bent forward until his forehead touched the top of the steering wheel. "And for the first time in years, my son cried alone in the dark, where nobody could thank the wrong man for it." She didn't call first. I was on the porch, replacing a board, when her car pulled into the driveway. She sat behind the wheel for a moment after the engine cut off, both hands still on it, head lowered. I wiped my hands and stood up slowly. She stepped out, carrying a folder against her chest. Her face had the look of someone who had spent days coming to terms with something and still hadn't quite arrived. "Hi, Jack." "Hi, sweetheart." Her mouth trembled slightly when I said it. "I'm sorry for just showing up. You don't need an appointment here." I opened the front door. She walked in and immediately noticed the photo of Lily on the mantel, 2 years old, holding a melting popsicle, grinning like she'd discovered fire. "She still makes that face," Claire said softly. "I know she does." We sat at the kitchen table. I poured iced tea for something ordinary to do with my hands. She opened her folder. The mortgage statement, the supplemental payment line, the name circled in blue pen. "Sullivan Family Trust." "Is this you?" she asked. She didn't ask it with anger. She asked it the way someone asks when they're afraid the answer will hurt more than the confusion already has. "Yes," I said. She stared at me. "All of it?" I went to the cabinet. Second drawer, left side. A man can hide the truth from people, but he always knows exactly where he put it. I laid the folder on the table. 4 years of payment records, invoices, attorney letters, every receipt, organized and undramatic. Claire turned the pages slowly. She didn't cry at first. She just looked stunned, like her mind was refusing to let the numbers become real. Then she turned one page and stopped. Riverside Methodist Hospital. Emergency C-section. Complications. 2 nights in recovery. Oh my God. She put her hand over her mouth. "You paid this." "The trust did, Jack." "I wasn't paying for credit," I said quietly. "I was paying because I love my granddaughter." Her shoulders folded inward. She looked younger suddenly, like one of her own second graders, trying not to cry in front of the class. "I thanked Richard for this," she whispered. Her voice broke on his name. "I made him dinner. I hugged him. I told him I didn't know what we'd do without him." I didn't answer. There are some humiliations a person has to set down by themselves. Claire wiped her cheek. "Why are you giving me all of this?" "Because you asked the right question," I said. "What question?" "You asked who actually paid, not who looked generous." That was when she finally cried, quietly, at my kitchen table, with 4 years of my invisible life spread out between us. I stayed still. Let her feel it. Some truths need a moment before they become something you can carry. Lily's 5th birthday, a Saturday in July. Claire texted me instead of calling. No long message, just, "Lily would really like you to come. 3 o'clock Saturday, just family." I looked at it for a long time. Then I typed back, "I'll be there." The afternoon was as Ohio gets. Blue sky, lazy clouds. Someone 2 houses over, mowing a lawn that didn't need mowing. I parked my old F-150 at the curb and sat with the engine off for a moment. For years, I had arrived at family gatherings, already calculating what needed fixing. This was the first time I showed up with nothing to repair, just a present wrapped in yellow paper. Lily spotted me through the front window before I reached the porch. She threw the door open and ran. "Grandpa, you came. I wouldn't miss your birthday." She leaned close and whispered, "Mom made chocolate cake." "Then I'm definitely glad I came." She giggled and pulled me inside. The house felt different. Not physically, emotionally. Quieter, more careful. Like everyone had arrived, knowing something important was going to happen, and nobody wanted to be the one who caused it. Melissa greeted me first, warm but uncertain. Richard stood near the kitchen island in a pressed golf shirt, holding iced tea, smiling the way people smile when they're not sure how the room is going to go. Jack, Richard, no handshake, no need for one. Ethan came from the hallway, carrying paper plates. Our eyes met. For the first time in months, he looked away first. The party felt surprisingly normal for almost an hour. Lily opened presents. Children chased balloons in the backyard. People talked about baseball and grocery prices. Nobody mentioned money. I almost believed they wouldn't. Then Richard stood up and lightly tapped his glass. If I could have everyone's attention. Conversations faded. He smiled with the ease of a man who had always been comfortable in the center of a room. "I just want to say how proud I am of this family. We've all made sacrifices over the years." He lifted his glass. "That's what family does." From the living room, a television came on. Every head turned. Claire stood beside it, her laptop open, one cable connected to the screen. No birthday slideshow, no photos of Lily. Just a scanned document. Mortgage statement. Supplemental payment received. Sullivan Family Trust. Silence. She clicked again. Hospital invoice. Paid in full. Sullivan Family Trust. Another click. Property taxes. Emergency plumbing. Roof replacement. HVAC repair. 4 years. Payment after payment after payment. Every single one. The ceiling fan was the only sound in the room. Richard slowly lowered his glass. Melissa stared at the television. "What?" she whispered. Claire turned to the room. "I've spent 3 days verifying every document." She clicked one final time. Attorney correspondence. Termination of trust payments. Dated the Monday after the barbecue. 2 days after Ethan told his father he'd never be half the man Richard was. The room became completely still. Richard cleared his throat. "There's been some misunderstanding." Claire looked directly at him. "Then explain it." "I never claimed these were my payments." "No." Her voice was calm and devastating. "You never corrected anyone either." He shifted his weight. "I assumed everyone understood." Ethan looked at him. "I didn't." Melissa said, "Neither did I." Richard spread his hands. "I introduced you to the accountant. I helped organize. You handled our paperwork," Ethan said. "You always said everything was under control. It usually was, but not because of you." Richard had no answer, because there wasn't one that made him look better than he already didn't. Melissa turned to face me, slowly, like a woman who had just realized she had been looking in the wrong direction for years. "Jack," her voice cracked. "I thanked him. Every Christmas." Tears filled her eyes. "I never asked. Not once. I never asked where any of it came from." I shook my head gently. "It's over." "No." She pressed her hand over her mouth. "It's not." Then Ethan stood. I had seen my son nervous before. Interviews, his wedding day, the delivery room. I had never seen him look like this. Like a man standing at the edge of something he had broken, and only just now understood the size of the damage. He walked across the room until we were 3 feet apart. Everyone else disappeared. He looked like the little boy who used to wait by the front window for my truck headlights to appear at the end of the driveway after late jobs. 7 years old, school night, past his bedtime. "I'm sorry," he said, barely a whisper. "I didn't lose my father." His eyes filled. I threw him away. Nobody moved. I took a slow breath. "I never stopped loving you," I said. He nodded, already crying. "I just stopped paying to be disrespected." His shoulders shook. "I deserve that." "No." I put my hand on his shoulder. "You deserve the chance to become the man I always believed you would be." He wrapped his arms around me. Not dramatically, not quickly, just the way a son does when he's been carrying something too heavy for too long and finally finds a place to set it down. Across the room, Claire quietly wiped her face. Lily didn't understand everything that had happened. She only smiled because Grandpa and Daddy were hugging again. Children recognize healing before adults do. Richard picked up his keys from the kitchen counter. Nobody stopped him. Nobody made a speech. He paused at the door, looked back once, and walked out. No slammed door. Just the sound of his car starting in the driveway, and then fading down the street. By the time the engine disappeared, everyone in that room understood that something real had found its way back home. Ohio January doesn't announce itself, it just arrives. The porch still creaked under my boots the same as it always had. The old wind chime Melissa bought decades ago still rattled in the cold. My left knee still predicted weather changes before any forecast could. Some things you carry forever. I've learned to be grateful for that. They remind you where you've been. The biggest difference wasn't in my house. It wasn't in my bank account or my retirement schedule. It was the sound of another pickup truck pulling into my driveway every Saturday morning at 8. Ethan's, not the SUV. A used pickup, simpler, the kind that doesn't say anything about you, except that you've stopped needing it to. He'd step out carrying a cardboard tray with 2 coffees. We'd sit on the porch in the kind of comfortable quiet that only exists between 2 people who have survived something together. One morning he cleared his throat. "Dad, why didn't you ever tell me? About the trust." I reeled my thoughts in slowly before answering. "When you were little, did you ever thank the furnace for keeping the house warm?" He frowned. "No, you just expected it to work." He looked down. "I wasn't helping so you'd treat me differently," I said. "I was helping because you were my son, and that was enough." A flock of geese passed overhead. "I don't know if I'll ever forgive myself," he said. "Don't waste your life trying to repay me. Take care of your family. And when Lily grows up," he looked up, "teach her that the people who love you most aren't always the loudest ones in the room." He nodded slowly. "I will." A few days later, Lily ran across my yard carrying a school project. Construction paper, crayon drawing, the kind of art that only a 5-year-old could produce and only a grandfather could truly appreciate. "My teacher said to draw a hero," she said proudly. She turned it around. A little stick figure in a baseball cap, standing beside a truck with 4 wheels far too large for the body. "That's a very nice truck," I said. She giggled. I couldn't draw all the rust. I laughed harder than I had in years. Then she wrapped her little arms around my waist and squeezed. Children don't care about trust funds or mortgage statements or who signed which invoice. They remember who showed up, who listened, who made them feel safe without making them feel small. As I held my granddaughter in the January cold, I understood something I had been circling for years. Almost nothing in my life looked different than it had 6 months ago. My knees still hurt. My truck had over 200,000 miles on it. The porch still creaked. But when Ethan hugged me goodbye now, he wasn't hugging the man who had quietly paid his bills. He was hugging his father, just his father. And somehow, after all of it, the years, the silence, the invisible weight, that was worth more than every single dollar I had ever spent. I want to leave you with something before I go. Helping the people you love is one of the greatest privileges of a lifetime, I believe that completely. But when kindness becomes invisible long enough, it stops feeling like love and starts feeling like expectation. And expectation, quiet, unchallenged, never examined, can hollow out even the strongest relationship without anyone noticing until the house has already gone cold. I did not step back to punish my son. I stepped back to give the truth room to breathe. And the truth, when it finally came, was not comfortable. It was not kind in the moment. It cost people something, but it gave us something back that no trust fund, no mortgage supplement, no roof repair could have ever purchased. It gave us each other, honestly, without the performance. If this story reminded you of someone in your life, a parent who gives quietly, a child who hasn't looked closely enough, a relationship where credit has been going to the wrong place, I hope you carry it forward. Share it with someone who needs to hear it. And the next time someone stands quietly in the background of your life, holding things together without asking for recognition, look closer, because the people who love you most are rarely the loudest ones in the room. Thank you for spending this time with me. Take care of yourself, and take care of the people who have been taking care of you.